All right, guys. So we are going to be looking at animal physiology. Part of looking at animal physiology is looking at when animals started appearing, when microscopic life started happening, and all of that. Now, to begin with, microscopic fossils started about 600 million years ago. So that's like the first multicellular life we see. There are fossils of eggs and fossils of embryos. Sometimes these are really well preserved fossils. We get these little round cells, even within, even as multicellular organisms put together. The problem, of course, is the vast majority of the parts of animals, especially animals that long ago, that small, are very soft and hard to fossilize. Not a lot of them had hard shells or skeletal structures of any kind. And so it's very difficult to get fossils of them, but they do exist in tiny little bits. Multicellular animals began to evolve before the Cambrian explosion. Now, the Cambrian explosion is not an actual explosion. The idea is during the Cambrian explosion, all of these new types of bodies started showing up. There started to be a real sort of branching out into many types of different organisms. Still, we start with these microscopic fossils that are 600 million years old. And by the time we get to the Cambrian explosion, we are looking at multicellular organisms ready and established. Now, the very first life is something called echidnarian fauna. Fauna are animal type life. They do have bilateral symmetry. Now, bilateral symmetry just means one eye this side, one eye that side. One ear this side, one ear that side. One nostril this side, one nostril the other side. One arm over here, the other arm over here, and so on. It's a bilateral symmetry that if you cut something in half, the two sides are the same. They also had segments. So they were divided into segments like a pill bug or an armadillo. And it had these different segments to it, had this bilateral symmetry, but there wasn't a front or back. So there wasn't this is where the eyes and the mouth and whatever are, or this is where the tail is. It was literally no front or back, just bilateral symmetry, segmented. They lived in the water. We have got nothing left alive today that looks even remotely like this. In addition, when we look at the fossils of it, there's very little evidence that the cells were specialized to any kind of particular function. There doesn't seem to be that the tissues were all that differentiated. You know how we've got nerve tissue and muscle tissue, heart tissue, lung tissue, etc. Didn't have that, or much specialization in organs, hearts, lungs, eyes, ears, etc. There's some real speculation that perhaps part of what's going on is that, like a modern coral, they actually had photosynthetic algae living within them. Now we see that we see that most clearly in lichens. Remember, we talked about lichens where you've got the fungus and the algae living together, and the algae, making food through photosynthesis, and the fungus holding onto and keeping the area watery enough, moist enough for the algae to live. And they may have had a similar sort of a thing, but this would be very different because it'd be an actual moving organism that goes from place to place. That while it moves around, it's still got this photosynthetic algae inside of it, which is pretty doggone cool. Cambrian explosion. Remember, we said 600 million years ago we get the oldest fossils. 542 million years ago. Basically, over the course of 10 to 15 million years, animals evolve complex body plans, much more complex than the Enchidarian ones we were talking about earlier, with no front, no back, little specialization, all that. Here, we've got these complex body plans with specialized cells, specialized tissues, specialized organs, hearts and lungs, and all that good stuff. All these different possibilities. We also see the first skeletons and shells. So we start seeing skeletons and shells, things that will actually be preserved when fossilized. So we see a lot more, and we know a lot more about these organisms. Two places, Xinjiang, China, and the Burgess Shale up in Canada. Those are the two main places that we find these organisms that